power on.
I've been hiding for far too long. Seems like forever. Been singing now this song. I've been trying too hard too long. Seems like forever. Been singing now this song. Not forever. Been singing now this song. All things I've seen, what has been done, has turned another man to a rolling stone. I've been struck down, lying on the ground, with a bitter taste of loathing in my mouth. I've been hiding for far too long. Seems like forever. Been singing now this song. I've been trying too hard too long. Seems like forever. Been singing now this song. Not forever. Been singing now this song. And there I was, weighing pros and cons, knowing what I do can never be undone. Lord have mercy on their souls. My retaliation strikes is about to fall. I've been hiding for far too long. Seems like forever. Been singing now this song. I've been trying too hard too long. Seems like forever. Been singing now this song. Not forever. Been singing now this song.
Woo! Open up 2019 with a rocker, baby. A little heat right there. I mean, that's hot, but also the band's name is Heat. Woo! It is the force that cannot be stopped, and baby, 2019. What a year we are going to have. Going to deliver on so many things that maybe some of it was supposed to go out in 2018, but it's going to hit 2019, baby. You got it. The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, the thriller. Woo! That is Savzilla, the man that some call the sexiest man alive. Woo. And then if anybody else knew about it, you better believe they'd say the same thing. What a weekend. Yes. So anyway, we have a lot to get into this week. We'll try to get to every segment, but of course, towards the end of the show, during the climax, I am going to give you my picks of 2018. We're going to go down the list. We're going to go, I mean, we have science and tech to get into, believe me, both, but we're going to get into my picks. We're going to get geeky. We're going to talk about, what was the best comic book of the year? What was the best movie of the year? What was the best album of the year? We're just going to break them all down. Maybe even what's the best cryptocurrency of the year? Woo, because you know that 2018 was, I mean, you don't want to say like it was like an up year, but a hell of a year. I mean, I would argue, like I did last week, that really all crypto's up. You know, you could say it's down, but really it's way, way up. But what does the Golden Stallion have to say about that? Woo, we will find out when we get to the climax. But before we get to the climax, we got to get to our story of the week. I mean, let's just open this baby right up. Of course, CES 2019 is going on right now. Personally, I mean, again, and this has nothing to do with our story of the week, though I could almost go on just an entire monologue about this matter. But, you know, CES, of course, in Las Vegas, the classic consumer electronics show, really all that it's good for. I mean, you have a bunch of people announcing shit. It's to the point now where it's almost like Black Friday, where really you're getting Black Friday sales weeks in advance. Companies are announcing what they're actually going to show off at CES weeks in advance. Now, I mean, that's been going on for a little while, but regardless, I mean, the best thing CES is, or, you know, the best thing you can get out of CES is maybe a cold. Because everybody does, right? I mean, that's the nature of a lot of conferences and conventions. But, you know, I used to review, to some degree, CES. And you know what? I'm going to talk about this a little bit. I used to review CES. Granted, it's still going on, so, you know, if I wanted to review it this week, I couldn't exactly anyway because it's not over. the thing is that what CES has clearly become, there was a time, let's be clear here, there was a time, I mean, granted, this is probably over 10 years ago, but there was a time where CES was showing you genuinely innovative products. And I'm sure somewhere at CES, there are still some innovative products. I mean, I think they even have like an award, like the CES Innovation Award or whatever. Okay. But now it's just really turned into what tech fad do larger tech companies want to schlep, want to push off onto you? Okay. 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, whatever, it was 3D televisions. Then it was curved televisions. Then it was, Bluetooth connected toothbrushes and refrigerators. This year, it seems to be everything just has Google. Last year, everything had Alexa in it. This year, everything has Google Assistant in it. So it's really just like it's fad of the year. That's all that you get out of CES. And look, I'm not interested in fads. Okay? I mean, there was a time where I did talk a lot about consumer electronics on Sovryn Tech, but that's, I mean, that time is so long past. That ship has so sailed. Consumer electronics are so boring. I mean, it's really boring, because at the end of the day today, consumer electronics are, I mean, even the smartphone isn't about cool shit that you can do. It's about how can these companies dupe you into thinking you need, I don't know, a thermal camera or facial recognition on your fucking smartphone, which the privacy and security implications of any of that should be readily apparent, especially since we've talked about them on this show. But, or why the fuck you want a microphone on your refrigerator? I mean, I would love somebody to talk to someone, everybody's all about, if we could get back to the good old days of America. I want you to go talk to the people of the good old days of America that weren't even the good old days, but, that just didn't fucking exist. But whatever, I could talk to somebody from the 50s in America and say, hey, how would you like to have a microphone in your refrigerator? They'd probably tell you to get the fuck out of their face. In fact, that might be so abhorrent to somebody from the 1950s in the United States of America that they might actually say fuck. Actually, I think they said fuck a lot, but regardless. So again, maybe somewhere in the deep recesses of Vegas at CES, someone's doing something interesting, but you're barely seeing that get reported on. If anything, those kinds of things are getting made fun of by the tech press, and so on. And I think it's a goddamn waste of time. You want to do something consumer friendly, you buy whatever little tech product you buy, and then you hack the shit out of it. And you bend it to your will, whatever that tech happens to be, your smartphone, or I don't know, take a drill bit to that Bluetooth chip in that fucking toothbrush. Whatever. Fuck. Anyway, it saves me the trouble, no doubt. It's not like I'm lazy. Like, I want CES to be this amazing fucking thing where great stuff that will change consumers' lives will get released, but it just doesn't. I mean, well, maybe there was that interesting thing like that Razer did. I mean, do we have that? Can anybody buy that where Razer had that gaming laptop where the screen, you could have 3 screens on it because the screen's folded out from the main one? Is that available to the public yet? No. Oh, well, they were just kind of demoing the product and maybe looking to gauge interest. Not a bad thing to do, but let's be clear here that that's all that was, and they weren't really delivering a product that was going to get into your house. So fuck that. Anyway, let's talk about something that's actually interesting. This is really our main story. Just kind of got sidetracked talking about CES. So we have some new pictures of the moon, baby. Courtesy of the Chi-Coms. Of course, courtesy of the Chinese government space agency. And in fact, this is kind of fitting because the User Podcast, which is a podcast that I do, a documentary podcast that I do for patrons only. In fact, you have to be in the $5 level of patrons and up, $5 and up, to get access to it. This month's episode is actually of User Podcasts is about the moon of all things. So this is kind of fitting and kind of going to get some up to the minute stuff in that episode. But so I want to read a little bit of the story from space.com, and this is just from January 5th. So this is super fresh, 2019. Here we go. China just landed on the moon's far side and will probably send astronauts on lunar trips. So let's read it here. China's historic robotic mission to the moon's far side could just be a preview of some unprecedented human exploration of Earth's nearest neighbor a few years down the road. Chinese officials have voiced a desire to send astronauts to the moon, and the nation's leadership places a premium on doing space-related things that have never been done before, such as landing on the mysterious lunar far side, which the Chang'e, that's how you pronounce it. It's Chang'e. I was listening to a lot of different various news sources talk about it, and they all pronounced it like dead wrong. It's Chang'e. And Chang'e 4 mission pulled off Wednesday and building the world's largest radio telescope. So those are, first off, Chang'e 4 is actually there. And in fact, they're going to mention it here. Chang'e 4 deployed a rover called Yutu-2, YUTU-2 on the moon's far side too. It's therefore likely that China has serious crude lunar ambitions that don't involve simply retracting the steps of NASA's Apollo astronauts, experts say. I think what we will see will be either more people, a more extended stay, or maybe landing at a pole, something that'll make people say, wow, that's not just replicating what other people have done. Dean Cheng, a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, who's an expert on China's space program, told Space.com. Quote, I could imagine a manned landing on the far side of the moon, though that's really risky, end quote, Cheng said. Real quick on that. The Heritage Foundation? Like, isn't that just a bunch of Republicans? Like what the fuck are... or a bunch of conservatives and people that want to like enable real ID, which is about as close to being China as you can imagine, considering what the Chinese government is doing as far as ID and reputation and within that country. Well, maybe that's why they keep such a close eye on China, because they're so goddamn similar. But anyway. But Dean Cheng goes on here for a second. He says, it says, another very real possibility, he added, sending a woman to the lunar surface. All 12 of the Apollo astronauts who walked on the moon between 1969 and 1972 were men, and none of them stayed on the lunar surface for more than 75 hours. Now, I want to read on a little bit more, but there is a point to this. But, I do want to say, so links are in the show notes for all of this, and there's more links than just the one that I'm reading from here from space.com. But you can see the pictures that Yutu-2 has been taking, as well as, is it Shikong? Anyway, the part of the delivery system for the Chang'e 4 mission was also taking pictures of the far side of the moon, which that's kind of a relatively new thing even for NASA to have, even though I think Soviet Russia got some very interesting pictures back in the day. To understand, the far side of the moon is that some odd 41% or like 40% of the moon that we don't see on Earth because of synchronous rotation, right? The moon does rotate, even though flat earthers would maybe say it doesn't. I have no fucking idea what they say, nor do I even care. But due to synchronous rotation with the Earth, we only see, around 60% of the entire moon. The other side is the far side, or what it may be popularly called because of a Pink Floyd album, the dark side of the moon. Now, it's not actually dark. There's plenty of light. And when you look at these pictures, it's very obvious that there's light on the other side of the moon. But that's pretty much what space.com means when they say it's mysterious, because we don't see it. We're not used to looking at it. And it's really not until fairly recently that we have any great pictures of it. And certainly China is for China, I don't know that this is exactly their first payload that they've sent to the moon. But for them to want to make a big deal and make a big splash, this is a very flashy thing to do. It's like, okay, yeah, we're sending a robotic rover to the moon. But we're going to do it on the side that most people don't look at. That's a bit of dick measuring, okay, on the Chinese government's part. But it is incredible, regardless of who's taking the picture, to see. It blows my mind that people, you should want to click on these links that I have in the show notes and just stare at them in awe when you see the pictures from the moon, because it's like, holy fuck, that's the moon. Now, I don't know if someone, again, I want to read more here. I'm going to guess that there are people out there who are going to claim, well, this is all a big conspiracy. What is there some Chinese Stanley Kubrick, right? that's faking this whole, are the Chinese faking, their little robots on the moon? Come on. And, it's actually kind of a good question. And I imagine some of my listeners do think that the Apollo missions or the moon landings were all a hoax, right? Do you think that, nothing's ever been to the moon? That we've never sent even probes, or remember we more or less sent that nuke to the moon? I mean, India's fucking sent probes to the moon. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that, if you're claiming that, no, we've never been to the moon, no one's been to the moon or something like that, I mean, pretty much India would have to be in on the gag because they've sent their own, rover. I mean, and look, I'll be the first to tell you that, because India, when they sent their probes, that was about a decade ago, and they were saying, hey, we found water here, when nobody was saying that there was water on the moon. It was theorized. But when they found it and it was conclusive, NASA comes out and says, oh, no, fuck, we already knew that. We knew that 40 years ago. But they never told anybody. Okay, so India wasn't in on that gag, but then are they overall in on the gag that you can land on the moon? Is China now in on the gag when I thought China was the great enemy? You got to watch out for China. China doesn't play ball with America. We got to do something about China. I don't understand where, who's lying here? Is this all just special effects? Is China engaging in great CGI? Was India doing great CGI? I mean, I don't know. I saw Enderhan. I don't think they do that great a CGI to fake the moon landing. Explain it to me. What's going on here? Anyway, that's not the point I want to get into as is. I want to read more from the story here. This is the subheader, is Prowess and Persistence. The first Chinese satellite didn't reach orbit until 1970, 13 years after the Soviet Union kicked off the space age with the launch of Sputnik 1. But China has steadily improved its off-Earth expertise over the decades and is now a major space power. For example, in 2003, China became just the third nation to launch astronauts into orbit after the Soviet Union and the United States. Since then, China has launched and sent people to two separate Tiangong space labs to help lay the groundwork for a full-on orbital outpost that China aims to have up and running by 2022 or so. So pretty much they want to have their own space station. And then there's the uncrewed side of things, and that's crews and CREW. Since 2007, the Chang'e program has delivered 2 robotic spacecraft to lunar orbit, Chang'e 1 and 2, dropped 2 rover-lander duos onto the moon's surface, Chang'e 3 and 4, placed a relay satellite in a stable Lagrange point beyond the moon called, and that's the one that was taking the picture of it. I think that's H.E.A.T or something like that, and sent a prototype capsule on an 8-day round-trip mission around the moon, Chang'e 5T1. That capsule is the forerunner of a container that will house lunar material on the Chang'e 5 sample return mission, which may launch as early as this year. There hasn't been a successful lunar sample return effort since 1976, when the Soviet Union's Luna 24 mission brought some moon dirt down to Earth. To provide a little more perspective on China's rise in 2018, the nation conducted 39 orbital launches, more than any other country. The United States was second with 31. So there's little reason to doubt China's ability to pull off a crewed moon mission. Indeed, China could well do it before NASA, which has said it aims to return astronauts to the lunar surface by the late 2020s. According to Joan Johnson-Frace, a professor of national security affairs at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, American space technology and innovation are superior, Johnson-Frace told Space.com, but China has one key advantage: political will. Political will is tough to maintain in the United States, which features frequent handovers of power. As a result, NASA's major goals have changed often over the decades. For example, President George W. Bush directed the agency to work to get astronauts back to the moon by 2020. Gee, how'd that work out? Yeah. Spawning a program known as Constellation. But in 2010, President Barack Obama canceled Constellation, shifting the human spaceflight focus to a near-Earth asteroid. And President Donald Trump recently made the moon the target once again. The relatively near-term target, that is. The long-term destination for NASA's human spaceflight program has remained Mars throughout. Such volatility does not plague the space program of authoritarian China, which has been ruled by the Communist Party since 1949. Quote, "We are capable, but the Chinese are persistent, and it's going to pay off for them," end quote, Johnson-Frace said. So anyway, China is getting to the moon. Now, they have a few years ago, so you got to understand a couple things about China, okay, and how they operate with a lot of, military, space program, which are in many ways one and the same, among other things. You got to understand how they work. They work on 5-year plans. They're really big on this. And I'm not saying, now, politically, I don't agree with any politics. I'm an anarchist, okay, but a 5-year plan is a great thing, certainly for an individual to do, I think for an organization to do, for a company to do, a business, a project, whatever. And clearly, those numbers bear out, and even the Chinese government engages in 5-year programs, thinking long term, at least 5 years, have a plan, have a budget, all the stuff, kind of thought out. I do the same thing. So their 5-year plans are largely public, and there is no sign of a lot of lunar action in their 5-year plans other than these Chang'e, missions. But a few years ago, China was talking, and they even they did a video. Now, here's where they did some CGI. And in fact, if you think what Chang'e 4 or what the Yutu-2 rover is sending back to Earth, if you think that that's all fake and special effects and everything, let me show you from just a couple years ago, okay? The fucking mock-up that China did. Oh, but it was all a ruse, right? That they used bad special effects just so you didn't think that they could fake it, that they were actually going to the moon. Right. But anyway, they had what they were effectively calling a lunar palace. Now, the funny thing is, you can look at this and you can laugh at it at what they had in mind, because it doesn't look like a palace at all. Okay. It looks like very much like various artists and concept designers had drawn, where there's a lot of tube-like buildings and everything on the moon that become space habitats for various astronauts and maybe one day people that are even born on the moon that they live in, right, in domes and all this other stuff. Very, very basic. It does, in very basic domes, and it's probably all some form of plastic, it does not, look like Disney's Magic Kingdom whatsoever. It is in no way a palace. But then that's because, and I know that people did laugh at the time, but then that's because they don't understand the importance of the concept of a lunar palace to the Chinese people in general. Because the name Chang'e itself is in reference actually to a woman in Chinese, well, I guess you would say, mythology that goes back quite a few thousand years, back to the Song Dynasty. And you had this great archer who takes out these 10 suns that appear in the sky. Okay, his name is H.E.A.T, and his wife is Chang'e. And there's this whole business about an immortality elixir and everything, and it's a crazy story. But bottom line is that Chang'e, who has to drink this immortality elixir but then whisks away, to stay close to her lover, she ends up building a palace on the moon. And she lives on the moon to stay nearby. Anyway, there's a bunch of different ways that this story gets told, but it's also the reason, if you've ever been either in East Asia, or if you know of any really big Asian communities, or even some restaurants in America would do this, where you have the Mid-Autumn Festival, okay, which usually runs somewhere in October, September, whatever. But the Mid-Autumn Festival, everybody has mooncakes. This is why, because of the story about Chang'e, Chang'e, where she builds this, she builds this lunar palace. So they didn't literally mean a palace in the sky. It's part of their mythology. So don't rip on them just because, their plans for a lunar colony don't look that impressive when they want to use the term palace, right? But at this point, you're probably wondering, why are you telling me all about this stallion? Well, honestly, seeing new pictures of the moon, especially a side of the moon that we don't see from Earth and that we rarely see pictures of, is interesting enough in itself. You should be clamoring to see these pictures. And honestly, regardless of who's doing it, this is remarkable human achievement that should be applauded either way. But that said, I want to tell you what I really think is going on here, because I think it has really broad ramifications, okay? I have said for some time that I think particularly Silicon Valley, which is kind of one of the major areas of economic growth for the United States and in some ways much of the world, was in a bubble. And that bubble was only saved, and dare I say temporarily, by blockchain, by the ability to create funding and currency within a technology itself and not needing it to come from the Federal Reserve or whatever other quasi-ruling body out there. But in my opinion, that's in many ways delaying the inevitable. Now, China, I think, is in a very similar situation where China has been investing a lot of its really surplus, what you could call almost trade dollars. Okay, all of the money that they've been making through the tremendous amount of, exports that they've been engaging in and so on. And they have more or less been throwing away those trade dollars because where they've put those trade dollars, investing in various, American enterprises and so on, has not really had a great return. Because, again, America is running into its own economic issues and bubbles and other things. And China pretty much just tried to put money, I think, in a lot of other areas. And that's why you have effectively entire ghost cities where there's whole cities, all new buildings built and nobody in these almost entire cities. It's crazy. And I've said for years on Sovereign Tech that I think anybody that tells you that, oh, yeah, invest in China, China's the future, blah, 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 has absolutely been full of shit. Now, I think that statement is still true, but I think China has perhaps wisened up a bit. And they know that the only way that they can continue growth and get some kind of return on that growth is by literally going up, that the sky is no longer the limit. They have to take this shit to the moon. And I mean, and that's not a Bitcoin joke either. Okay. They literally have to go to the moon if they are going to get some kind of return on a lot of the surplus cash, frankly, that they have had. Because it's not working by investing in America, which, of course makes sense because, I mean, most American companies are, well, not most, but a lot of the bigger American companies and other areas that China has invested within, within America's economy, they are not getting the return and that those areas are positively ridiculous for varying reasons. And I think China knows that eventually the piper has to get paid. And they're going to be left with a really, really ugly bill. And so their theory is get to the fucking moon. I don't know. Maybe they want to, engage in collecting helium-3. I mean, if with Chang'e 5, if they are planning on actually doing return, what automated return missions from the moon and bringing samples back, well, then I think it makes all the sense in the world that they would want to be going for helium-3 and making that kind of part of their future economic and overall growth plans. It's the only way you can go. I mean, because I personally believe there is limited growth on Earth. Okay, we're reaching that breaking point. That's part of what was going to bring on the bubble with Silicon Valley. Again, blockchain has put a temporary reprieve on that, but I only say temporary. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago. How tech investors themselves, tech execs themselves, are just waiting for the bubble to pop. They are just waiting for an economic collapse in America. They know that it's going to happen. Now, I don't think the economic collapse is going to happen like a lot of certain economists want to lay it out, bank runs and this other kind of weird shit. I think it's going to take a very different shape. That's a conversation for another time. But bottom line is that I think China sees something very similar. And so they are going, where there is no limit, where it's not even just the sky's the limit. There's no fucking limit. So this is literally a move to save China's economy. I mean, that's literally what it is. But that said, it does speak to an overall message that I had through some of 2018, a lot of 2017 as well, is that I think really within the next decade, okay, and I mean, if you want to count it 2020 to 2030, fine, but I meant really more between 2017 and 2027. But within the next decade, the idea of humans more permanently living in space and not just astronauts, but more full on everyday quote unquote citizens, whatever the fuck that means. Yeah, I think that's happening. I think that's going to happen. And I think these kinds of missions and China pushing hard, I mean, even though it's not necessarily in their 5-year plan, like we said, that doesn't mean that from 2025 and up that their lunar palace isn't going to happen. And I mean, they're making the right moves here. And I think that this is, again, there's a lot of stuff not really, analysts aren't exactly pointing at the purpose of that. I think that return mission with Chang'e 5 is far more interesting than anything else that they had planned originally. But they're pretty much setting up, their own little robotic workforce on the moon. And, they're going to get a payoff from this. That's the only reason they're doing it. But I'll tell you this, if someone is like, oh, well, they're going to be setting up, nuclear weapons. They're getting ready to attack us from the moon and all. No, you don't understand. Okay, if they're setting up robotic return services from the moon, it's because they want to bring shit back that they can sell on Earth. You can't sell helium-3 if you blow up the fucking Earth. Okay? Get over it. Even, I mean, as much as like, I don't think China is the economic boomtown that a lot of asshats would tell you that it is. All right. I mean, they have pretty much figured out that business over bullets is a hell of a way to get stuff done as compared to the opposite of, like, just threatening to blow everybody up. That's outrageous. So get that little theory out of your head, because there's no way that's happening. That's not even in the plans for what they're doing here. But if you want to take something really hopeful out of this, again, this is pointing at the fact we're getting that much closer to really starting to inhabit space. And once that happens, oh boy, this whole thing gets set free. But we'll be keeping a close eye on it. I'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. Woo, have I got something exciting to share with you. Got a new sponsor for Sovryn Tech, baby, and I am honored by this one because it is where, where I cut my radio teeth, shall we say, where my chops were tested. Anyway, Free Talk Live. If you have never heard this show, if you have never heard Free Talk Live, of course you're hearing Sovryn Tech, you are missing out on a show that runs 7 days a week, 3 hours a night. It is the number 27 talk show in the nation, in the United States. Number 27. Think about all the talk shows that are out there. Number 27, and you're not listening to it. And, look, if you're into personal freedom, believe me, Free Talk Live is where most people, they get started on their journey with it, and they keep rocking their journey with it. You want to check this out. Free Talk Live. I want you to go to freetalklive.com. There are so many episodes to listen to. You think there's a lot of Sovryn Tech out there? Wait till you see how many. This show's been going for over a decade. Okay? Free Talk Live has been going for over a decade. You want to listen to it, freetalklive.com. It is such a great show. You can call right in. They barely do any call screening either, okay? I mean, this is like the old Art Bell stuff. You can call right in, and you can pretty much talk about just about anything you want, and the conversation can be had. I know. I was a co-host on the show for just about over 2 years, and it was one of the best times of my life. I love being on Free Talk Live. I loved being on Free Talk Live, and you can actually be on it by calling in, or you can just start listening now. Go check it out. You can download podcast versions of every episode. Go to freetalklive.com, and if you want, let them know you heard about it through the Golden Stallion on Sovryn Tech, and I guarantee you're in for a treat. Go check it out, freetalklive.com. Woo, let's get back to the show. But I'm so honored to have them sponsor Sovryn Tech. All right, like I said, back to Sovryn Tech, back to the show.
HackSec.
Ooh, it's time for HackSec. And, oh, man. These are the stories you read where you go, what the fuck? And I'm comforted that at least more, shall we say, relatively more mainstream tech news sources are picking up on what's really going on and what these things are really all about. The story I've got is from Android Police, and it's about USB Type-C. Now, in general, USB Type-C, which, everybody knows what it looks like. If you have a more modern smartphone, you've probably seen it, where it kind of looks like USB, looks like micro USB, but it's, it has a more universal size. You can plug it in any direction and it works. And all kinds of devices are using it. Most laptops, or a lot of laptops today, will have ports for it and so on. And it can do all kinds of impressive data transmission speeds and data transmission in general, right? Where it can, handle Thunderbolt 3, and you could effectively, hook up a graphics card, like a full-on NVIDIA GTX Titan, to the smallest of laptops, as long as it has Thunderbolt 3, right? Or you can even, you could connect, anything. You could put a monitor into a USB-C port. It's really amazing just how adaptable USB-C is. And that was the real promise of USB-C, is that here is, kind of like a Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all, one port to rule them all. This is the port that can do everything. It can handle Ethernet. the hubs that you can buy and all the shit that you can plug into one USB-C port is mind-boggling because of the amount of power that can come out through it, right? Including, like, you could charge your device through USB-C, and that means you could buy a charger that could charge your phone as well as your laptop, right? Like, not a charger. Well, yeah, you could get a charger that could do it, but like, you could get a battery from Anker or something that would actually charge both, a portable battery, which is so cool. The incredible adaptability of USB-C is why everybody was so on board with, fuck yeah, let's go USB-C. Well, now there's something being announced called the USB Type-C Authentication Program. And, here, I'll read the headline from Android Police, because, again, I'm really glad that they picked up on what this is all about. I thought the same thing as soon as I heard about it, and when I saw their headline, I was like, you guys picked it. You guys got it. So it's USB Type-C Authentication Program gets started. Sounds like it's effectively DRM for Type-C devices. Bingo. So there it is. Let me read a little bit. Today, the USB-IF, the nonprofit behind the USB standards, marketing, and specifications, revealed the formal launch of its USB Type-C authentication program, originally announced back in 2016. The optional program, quote, defines cryptographic-based authentication for USB Type-C chargers and devices, end quote. If that sounds like a thinly veiled euphemism for hardware DRM to you, that's because it is. The new authentication mechanism empowers, quote-unquote, vendors to, quote-unquote, protect us customers against, quote, non-compliant USB chargers, end quote. Bad chargers and cables were a legitimate problem for the USB Type-C ecosystem. Benson, think of that. But the USB-IF's program allows for vendors to use this means of accessory certification for anything they choose. This isn't just a standard set by the USB-IF for cables and chargers to meet. Any OEM can use it to bake in support for only quote-unquote approved devices if they like. Remember when Apple clamped down on third-party hardware with its MFI certification program? Now USB-C wielding OEMs can get in on some of that licensing action, and better, it's being done in the name of security. So, and it keeps going on, but the bottom line being here is that, so USB, putting in, certificates, digital certificates, security certificates into the USB-C protocol is, at face value, sounds like a great idea, right? It's like, because really, your USB ports are effectively a gateway or an exploit into your devices, whatever they happen to be, your laptop, your smartphone, whatever has a USB-C port. Hell, it could even be a TV, and to put like security there would be wonderful. In fact, I think Google on Chromebooks, they launched some kind of new USB protocol that will, when you lock a Chromebook, it will lock the USB ports. So there's a genuine need. This needs to be, securing USB ports is genuinely a very important thing to do, and it needs to happen. Of course, arguably, Apple, of course, they're kind of copying. There was I can't remember. It begins with a T. There was a name for it a few years ago. It was kind of a kickstarted or crowdfunded Android phone that had no ports on it whatsoever, and it like charged, with like a magnetic cord. It's been theorized that like in a couple generations, iPhones won't have any ports whatsoever on them. And there's a security argument to be made for that. If there's no port to plug into, then hey, great. That's one less attack vector. But that's not what any of this is about. Okay, as genuine a problem as that is, and kudos on, with Chromebooks. Wow, what, for the consumer, again, it's not going to stop the NSA, but your run-of-the-mill cracker, your run-of-the-mill malicious actor, it's impressive, the security on Chromebooks. It really is. And it always has been, from secure boot on up. But much like Rahm Emanuel said years ago, I think this is effectively what he said. You don't let a good disaster go to waste, which is a really kind of very twisted thing to say, depending upon who's saying it, I suppose. But the idea there is that, okay, well, we know that this is a security problem, and we can sell off the concept of it being more secure to the average consumer, but security researchers know the game, know the deal instantaneously. This is so, and not to say that this hasn't been tried before. This is effectively the software version of, Sony putting that funny little notch in their power supplies for your old stereo, right? So that way you couldn't use a more universal, AC cord, right, to plug your stereo into the wall. You had to have the Sony one. But that was a hardware trick where, you created, or like with your laptop, how laptops have all different kinds of chargers. Now you can buy like universal ones that would hopefully, that come with a bunch of different heads that can maybe match voltage and everything. But then you have to buy one of those funny universal ones to do that. But that's the old trick, was to do it with hardware, where you have a very specific charger, even though in many ways, really any charger should more or less work with any laptop, but they don't. This is the software version of that, to where, and it's far more insidious and worse. Because with software, if you tell it, no, in the firmware, in the UEFI, okay, and that's the other thing too. You think, well, maybe I could cheat it with the BIOS. No, with the UEFI, you're already baking in, a lot of security certificates anyway before the computer even turns on. All right, and the UEFI is what replaced UEFI. That's what replaced what used to be called the BIOS. So this isn't some hack you're going to be able to do in Windows where you can get it to accept. You could get past those security certificates and get your USB-C port to accept any charger you want. Okay, this is something that is going to be right from when you hit the on button, or even before you hit the on button. The only devices, or the only plugs that would say work with charging your device, be it smartphone, laptop, whatever, is going to be the one that the OEM, the company itself, be it Dell, Lenovo, whoever, that they say is actually like the real charger, or whatever. But then this gets ugly, because now you could close off all kinds of different USB-C devices, and again, the security argument is valid, but then also this can be used for what I dare say are dastardly things, and keeps us from getting to a point that I think is really important, which is open source hardware. It makes a great argument for why we need open source hardware as much as we need open source software. Okay. But this is closing off the ability, because eventually it gets to the point where, you think it's just chargers for right now. But then, what are at CES, a lot of companies are showing off USB-C headphones. Well, maybe Lenovo wants you to only use their headphones. Okay. And so, any other company's USB-C headphones that you plug in aren't going to work. Or you like that nice USB-C hub that you got for that computer? No, now, so you can plug in Ethernet because it only comes with one fucking port. For whatever reason, your computer only has one port on it. All right. I've been there, the Asus ZenBook, right? Now, oh no, you have to get the hub. You want to plug in, Ethernet and a few USB 3.0 cables and maybe an HDMI. You want to do that? You've got to get the official Asus USB-C hub. That's what this is going to lead to. So you know what? Fuck them. Like just keep the standard open. The better thing to do would have been for them to put in, really, you couldn't put in necessarily any kind of security. I think the better thing to do for the USB IF would be to support the standard, much like what Google was doing with their Chromebooks. That's a real solution, where when the computer's fucking locked, meaning that the person's away from it or not using it, it shuts down the USB ports unless there's a device already plugged in. That's how it works with the Chromebooks, is that if there's a device that's already plugged in, it will keep that port open, but then once you unplug it, it'll close it off. That's a real security solution right there. This is just going to end up hurting a bunch of little cottage companies that have come up that have done very well for themselves, creating interesting USB-C devices because of the openness of the standard. Well, that open standard of USB-C just got closed off. Way to go, motherfuckers. Anyway, I'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. Woo! Hey, baby, I know. You are tired of Gmail. You have had enough. Well, I have a solution for you. What I want you to do is you go to Fastmail, okay? It's fastmail.zog.ninja. That's the URL you can use. You're going to get a discount with that. You are going to love this. This is email for email's sake. This company does nothing more. Just email, and they do it right. All the latest security technologies. You want to log into your account with your YubiKey? You can do that. Fastmail has your hookup. Very inexpensive plans. I want you to check it out. You go to fastmail.zog.ninja.com. That'll get you the hookup, and it's an honor to have them as a part of Sovryn Tech. Woo! Let's get back to the show.
The Climax.
I know everybody's wanting, Hey, where's our where's our online review of the week? It hasn't been here for a couple weeks. Don't worry, it's going to come back. I have so many great products, great shit to read to you. We'll get to it, okay? But this week's episode is kind of special, and there were a couple topics I really wanted to get into, which we did, and I kind of had that little longer conversation about CES at the beginning that I didn't plan on, but that's how it rolls, baby. Much like a cheese. Anyway. So what I want to get into for the Climax, of course, the Climax is part of the show where I can talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about, baby. But I promise, and I've been doing this every year for years on Sovryn Tech, and that is we do our little wrap up of the year previous, not of necessarily tech, but of, shall we say, entertainment of, what has been, what has come out. And we're going to get into a little bit of tech with this one, which is going to be kind of a new thing where I do a cryptocurrency of the year, something that really impressed me with its performance. And, if I was going to, admittedly, if I was going to have given a pick for 2017, not 2018, but 2017, I probably would have picked Zcash, or what is now Horizon. That's Z-E-N at the end. For 2018, though, we'll get into that. We'll find out what that is. But this is our top picks of 2018. Anything that came out in 2018, and we got a few categories here. So, and I'm going to start it off with the thing that really I don't need to say a whole lot about, because if you listen to last week's episode of Sovryn Tech, that being episode 308, you already heard about it. You already heard my full review of the matter. And that is our movie of the year. And I am going to give movie of the year to Aquaman. Just mind fucking blown at how great that movie was. And it is still rocking the top spot. It is doing so well. Again, you heard my review last week. I think the movie, it's not, again, this isn't Citizen Kane. It's nothing along those lines, but it is so much fun, and it's just so epic, and there's so much going on. The comedy lands pretty well. There's some good romance in it, and it's just so comforting to finally have a comic book movie that's like worth its salt. No pun intended, as far as like salt water. And in fact, a person whose opinion I care about more than any other, she thought that it was just a phenomenal movie. And, I trust her. You can trust her. Woo! And so, it's just totally movie of the year. Knocked that one right out of the park. It had everything going for it as far as production-wise and all that. Like I said, the only real issue I had with it is pacing was a little too much, a little too fast. And Jason Momoa sometimes was a little flat, even though I really do like him as an actor. But regardless, Aquaman, phenomenal. I got to give that movie of the year. Album of the year. Now, this is one, the album of the year, music album of the year, obviously. If I was to do soundtrack of the year, yeah, I might even hand that to Aquaman as well, because it's such a varied a soundtrack that has some really, really nice cues, including cues, like I said, that were reminiscent of Daft Punk with Tron Legacy, which is easily one of the best soundtracks of all time. Just handily. In fact, tell you what, you want worst soundtrack of the year for 2018? Solo: A Star Wars Story. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking with that. I've never listened to a Star Wars soundtrack less. I listened to Shadows of the Empire, the soundtrack for that, more than I listened to Solo: A Star Wars Story. That's crazy town. No Star Wars movie should have a shitty soundtrack. And sure as fuck, the soundtrack for a book, that being Shadows of the Empire from the 90s, shouldn't be better than a full-on, multi or whatever, $100-some-odd million, $200 million movie production shouldn't have a weak-ass soundtrack. That's crazy talk. So there, you got that little pick out of me as well. That one's for free. But anyway, so, but music album of the year has to go to, now if you're a patron, patreon.com/SovrynTech, or just go to SovrynTech.com. If you're a patron, every Wednesday when we do the Wednesday Q&A, I do an album of the week. Okay. And most of the time it's an album that I liked. Sometimes I've done ones that I don't like, but you've probably heard me rave about this one. And it's by a band that I've been a fan of for a long time. I kind of introduced them, I know, to quite a few people, a lot of listeners, the thousands and thousands of you a few years ago on Sovryn Tech, that being Amaranth. Ooh, what a band. One of the best newer rock acts. Obviously they've been around for, almost a decade now. But they're like 5 albums deep, depending upon how you count them. And their newest album, which came out in end of October, was just incredible. It's called Helix. And this is more or less a track for track album. There's a couple of tracks on there in the mid part of the album that kind of break speaking of pacing, they sort of break the pacing to where they slow it down a little too much. But overall, it's a tremendous album. Opens up with a song called The Score, which is not as strong as opener. It's not as strong an opener as Maximize from, what was it? Maximalism was the name of their last album. But it's a great opener. Very intense, very fast paced, just get you going. Then it goes into 365, another solid track. Inferno, probably my favorite song on there. Very, very intense. You know, it has like almost a dance metal beat to it in a way. And Elise's voice, the lead singer of Amaranth, she's fucking amazing. Has had a hell of a year, really, along with her duet acts on other Metal Axe albums. But anyway, then it goes into Countdown, great song. Helix, great song. Dream is where things start to like a little bit fall apart. GC6 is a little harder than usual. Then it goes into Breakthrough, Starshot. Anyway, I think it's really track for track, even though I think some of the ordering of the songs kind of kills the pacing, but really not really a weak track on the entire album. So that's easily album of the year. Frankly, as soon as I heard that Amaranth was going to have a new album this year, I more or less knew that it would be album of the year. I mean, they're one of the best sounding new metal acts in so long. I mean, and they deliver a really original package. Within Temptation was supposed to have their new album come out in early December. They bumped that to February 1st, I think, of 2019. That might have unseated Amaranth's release. In fact, like the few songs I've heard from Within Temptation's upcoming album were, I think it's called Resistance, were amazing. I mean, wow. Or Resist. I think it's just called Resist. But incredible songs. And so it's a shame that didn't come out in 2018, because then that could have been an interesting comparison, and there might have been a little bit of a battle. But really, no album compared to Amaranth's Helix this year. Just incredible. Comic Book of the Year. This is an interesting category. And it's a year where, I mean, I could have broken down, like, what's comic book movie of the year and so on. Well, Aquaman would have won that too. But Comic Book of the Year, this has been a very interesting year where the Rebirth line in DC has become a thing. A lot of, Image has done a lot of shakeups, as well as Valiant has had really big shakeups with Exo Manowar and even Ninjak. Marvel is whatever the fuck Marvel's doing. Yeah, I can't keep track. I mean, there was some cool shit at one point, what they were doing with like Doctor Doom and so on, but okay, that's over. But anyway, Comic Book of the Year is actually going to go to Dynamite's really relaunch. And in some ways, I mean, like, it wasn't an origin story. It was very much a continuation of the work that Jean-Claude Forrest, spearheaded decades ago. But Mike Carey was heading this with Dynamite, and that is Barbarella. It went for a full year. It did a full 12-issue run, and then they had what was effectively a holiday special issue that was giant-sized and incredible. Barbarella was, and I think I talked about Barbarella on the Climax throughout 2018. It shouldn't be a surprise that things I've talked about are being the top picks for this year, because there's a reason that they inspired me to talk about them. I mean, the time of the Climax for Sovereign Tech is very precious time, so it's got to be something special or something really terrible if I'm going to talk about it. And Barbarella was easily, I mean, this comic is so needed, and it's a shame that it ended after 12 issues. I'm going to guess it might not have sold well. It was a mature comic, as in rated mature, as adult. There was nudity, there was lots of sex, there was all kinds of things, but very, very ideological, philosophical comic run. And I mean, so fucking well done and very weird. Everything that you want out of Barbarella, and of course, very, very sexy, which is maybe the most important thing with Barbarella. That's how you inject the ideology, right? Is that you cloak it in sexy. But because it was a quote unquote mature comic, those kinds of things aren't doing well right now. What's selling now is whatever is based around whatever movie happens to be, the new hotness at the time. And yeah, I just, Barbarella, one of my favorite characters, fiction characters of all time. It's so cool to see Jean-Claude Forest's work, come back and in such great, like I said, very ideological, very thought-provoking fashion, and of course, very sexy. It's one of the best comics you can read. If I were to lay out some other ones, I mean, sadly, like a lot of my picks over the past couple of years have either been canceled or whatnot, like when they were doing the sequel comic book series to Star Trek Beyond, that unfortunately ended up getting canned, which was so well done. What a shame. A lot of the Star Trek comics this year were actually really great. Like the whole Next Generation Mirror Universe comic series that had been running, that could have taken top spot as well if I could have count those, like Mirror Broken and Through the Mirror. Those were tremendous miniseries, and you even have Terra Incognita, which is still continuing that IDW is doing. The Power Rangers comic has had another solid year. That's probably, if you were to ask me what's the best comic running over the past 3-4 years, the Power Rangers comic from Boom Studios is hands down the best comic book series still running today. But Barbarella takes top spot for 2018. I mean, it rung in 2018, and it kicked 2018's ass and did it in such sexy fashion. So totally our comic of the year. So let's see. Now, maybe books. Let's do a little book action here. Nonfiction book of the year, and then we'll do a fiction book of the year. I think it's important to differentiate those. I got to give it to, came out in May, Order of Time. The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli, which is a fascinating read. I did a full review of it on Patreon. And basically, it's all about the idea that there is only, it's a scientific explanation by Carlo Rovelli, who's a very, very respected physicist, who's really big on quantum gravity, on the quantum gravity theory. But, that's a whole other story. But that does play into his concept of time, basically saying that there is no past or future, there is only now. There is only the present at any given point, of course, basing that around space-time. Not a new idea for Sovereign Tech listeners. I've been saying that for a while. In fact, I crack the joke often that one of the most accurate scientific statements ever made in Hollywood history was from Rocky III, where Apollo Creed says to Rocky, "There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow." Right? And he yells that out. So true. But anyway, I said that years ago. But Carlo Rovelli drives the point home and does so with his usual poetic flair and panache. So The Order of Time, you can't go wrong. It's a short book, it's a short read, but man, does it hit it home. Very, very interesting thing to check out. Again, Carlo Rovelli's he's no crackpot. I mean, he's as legit as they come, and he just has a very interesting take on things. So nonfiction book of the year, The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. Fiction book of the year for 2018. This is one that might be interesting because, well, let's be honest, a lot of 2018, in fact, I do an entire show about this with my dear friend, Robin Freebeard, who we do the Star Wars update on Patreon, which some interesting things might be happening with that in the near future. But anyway, we were covering all of 2018, and it's a year of ups and downs. Like Star Wars, one could argue that as far as the past few years go, or really ever since Disney bought Star Wars, that's 2018 was an ugly, ugly year for Star Wars. I mean, there's a lot of great things too, but overall, the feeling may not be the best. And I have to give, but I'll tell you, fiction book of the year goes to, this came out in March, a few months, about three or 4 months after the movie came out, but the novelization of The Last Jedi. Now, The Last Jedi, I get the problems with the movie. I think a lot of the problems with the movie were solved by what's called Star Wars The Last Jedi Expanded Edition, which was done by Jason Fry. Jason Fry is a very interesting character to follow. He's a very interesting guy, and he gives a lot of insight into his writing and everything. He's interesting to follow even on Twitter because he talks a lot about his writing process for The Last Jedi, and it's far more interesting than anything Rian Johnson ever had to say on any of the special features, like say on The Last Jedi Blu-ray. But yeah, Star Wars Last Jedi, I mean, it gets into, you get more Snoke, you find out something about Snoke, you get a lot more explanation of what's going on in Luke's head, to where maybe some of the attitudes that people had problems with that Luke, put on display, or that Mark Hamill put on display, on the screen, the book does a better job of getting into Luke's head, and you can find out more of what's going on there. One of those things that, books are far better at than movies, as far as like having that inner dialogue or that, that goes on in a person's head or in a character's head. So, Yeah, I thought that, and I said this on the Star Wars update, that the Star Wars The Last Jedi Expanded Edition novelization of the movie is 10 times better than the movie. It really is, and I think it solves so many of the movie's flaws. There's even, I mean, again, it's an expanded edition, so it has added quote-unquote scenes. Like there's the funeral for Han Solo at the beginning, which is very well done. There is a very interesting exchange between Rey and General Organa or Princess Leia at the on aboard the Millennium Falcon at the end of the quote unquote movie, but in this case the book, you get that, and so when the ending gets with Broom Kid, it doesn't feel as bad. It expands and improves upon the movie in endless ways, and that I think if all of that was in the movie, people would have thought far more kindly of it. Not entirely, because there's arguments that this book does not solve that a lot of Star Wars fans legitimately have with the film. But I think the book solves a lot of it. So if you haven't read a Star Wars book, this is a great place to start, because it's easy to picture the things in your mind since you can match it with the visuals that you saw on the screen. Even though I think the beauty of reading is that you make your own visuals, but that's another conversation. So TV show of the year, how about that? We got into books, we did movies, we did music. How about we get into a TV show of the year? TV show of the year is going to go to, and it just came out towards the end of the year, and really it was the second season of it, but Castlevania, which is a Netflix series. Of course, you could just torrent it. You don't have to use Netflix. Don't fall into the Netflix cult. But yeah, Castlevania was written by Warren Ellis, and his writing just shined in season 2. Season 2 was incredible. It's, Voltron, Voltron Legendary Defender, that ended this year. Season 8, or ended in 2018. I could have given that, show of the year, but that was already show of the year, I think, for like 2017. So I didn't want to give it to it again. But Castlevania is picking up the charge, shall we say, of great, it's an animated show, just like Voltron, but I don't want to differentiate between the two. Okay. Like what's the best animated show? What's the best, live action show? No, because honestly, animated television is oftentimes far superior to live action television. So fuck it. If live action television isn't delivering the goods, well, then animated will pick up the slack. And Castlevania is, everything they're laying out as far as, there's concepts in that you think apply to magic and so on that are very, very interesting. There's some really wild shit that gets laid out in that show, even as far as ideas go. But the action is awesome. The music, Trevor Morris's score is great this year in season 2. There's so much to love, and it's such a great show. Season 3, I think, has already been greenlit. I can't wait for it. Even if it doesn't come, season 1 and season 2 made for a very enjoyable set of hours. So yeah, best, whatever makes a TV show, what does that even mean anymore? Is a Hulu show a TV show? Is a Netflix show a TV show? Whatever. Anyway, something that's not on the big screen, Castlevania takes them all down. It's that fucking good. So if you've never watched it, check it out. All right, so let's end it off with some tech. And of course, let's talk about the cryptocurrency of the year. And not blockchain project, but the cryptocurrency of the year. I've got to give it to Bitcoin. And it's such an easy pick, right? You could say, but just the fact that Bitcoin just keeps on rolling. And even with everything that happened with Bitcoin Cash and so on, Bitcoin development, it didn't even slow down. Lightning Network is still rocking going forward. In fact, coming into 2019, it's back over 4,000, per coin. Bitcoin is just, it's the war horse, right? Or like, what's the old saying, the honey badger of money? It really is. It just keeps on going. And even when it was under 4,000, like I said, was it last week or the week before? That's down from where it was in 2017. But as far as like from where it was not even a few years before that, it's way up. Like it's not really down. That's you're being glasses half empty, right? Like if you're saying that. So yeah, Bitcoin, I think just proved itself that it can get through all the development woes, all the competition, and it can just keep on going. I have to give cryptocurrency of the year to Bitcoin. That said, I'm going to give an honorable mention to Zcash, because Zcash really weathered, percentage-wise, through a lot of metrics, really weathered kind of the crypto winter and the storm of 2018 very well. in comparison to not necessarily, in my opinion, fluctuating with Bitcoin's price or other altcoins or like Ethereum or anything like that. Zcash really, I feel like it stood on its own this year. And that's awesome. I mean, that's impressive. I've been a long supporter of Zcash for a very, very long time. And I was really impressed by that. So kudos to Zcash, as far as that goes, and absolute kudos to Bitcoin. Definitely cryptocurrency of 2018, and I mean, it could be cryptocurrency of the year any year, but I think this was a year particularly where it got through a lot of shit and it, came out still shining. So Bitcoin's not going anywhere. But anyway, okay, that is it. That's our awards, shall we say. I do a person of the year. I used to do that, but that's not something I'm going to do anymore because unless somebody really fucking impresses me, I would do a person of the year award for Sovryn Tech. But, to put it simply, I'm not really interested in venerating anyone right now. So certainly not anybody with like any real like brand recognition of any kind. So anyway, there you have it for first episode is 2019. There you have it for 2018. And we got some great stuff happening this year. And oh man, I can't wait to share it all with you. If you want to become a patron, you want to support the show, of course, go to sovereigntech.com, get your hookup. You can do just for $1 a month, or you can do significantly more. The more you put in, the more you get. Whew, check it out. I will see all of you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.